Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. The Sensex and the Nifty end at the low point of the day, tracking quarterly earnings. Mid-caps relatively underperform. Metal stocks buck the downtrend. Wipro meets muted estimates in Q1. Revenue contracts 2% on a constant currency basis. Margins improve sequentially, beating estimates. Axis Bank disappoints in Q1. Profits take a hit as provisions jump. Asset quality deteriorates as slippages rise to 8,200 crore rupees. Net interest income misses estimates. We're very close to a trade deal with India, says President Donald Trump yet again. Claims the deal will open up India. The Indian negotiating team is scheduled to continue talks in Washington today. Top U.S. bankers bat for the Federal Reserve's independence on the back of Trump's public feud with Jerome Powell. David Solomon of Goldman Sachs says one should fight to preserve the Fed's independence. Brian Moynihan of Bank of America says that a stable central bank is important to the country. India's largest bank launches a 25,000 crore rupees share sale, its biggest equity fundraise in the last 8 years. The issue will lead to equity dilution of nearly 3.5% and strengthen the bank's capital base. A committee appointed by the insurance regulator advises against merging insurance companies with non-insurers. Sources say the panel, led by former SBI Chief Dinesh Khara, flags risks to policy holders if such mergers are allowed. That's an exclusive. Auto component maker Sona BLW is in advanced talks to supply Chinese electric vehicle maker BYD. Sources say the company may set up a manufacturing plant in China. That's an exclusive. A Wall Street Journal report citing black box recordings claims that the captain of the doomed Air India plane turned off the fuel flow to engines. The junior pilot reportedly panicked and asked the captain why he turned off the switches. The preliminary investigation report did not release the entire black box recording or identify which pilot said what in the cockpit. The president of Syria accuses Israel of trying to ignite chaos in the country after Israeli military strikes hit the heart of Damascus. The attacks on Gaza continue, with over 90 people being killed in the last 24 hours, including 30 people who were waiting in a queue for food assistance. At least 4 people are killed and several injured after security forces in Bangladesh clashed with supporters of ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Violence was sparked by a march towards Hasina's ancestral home, organised by a new political party formed by students who led the uprising.
There are always conflicts between an organization's interest and any stakeholder's interests, whether it is the promoters or the employees. And the key thing which the organization interest comes first.
Yeah. Harsh Mariwala tells CNBC TV 18 he's grooming his son Rishabh to succeed him as Marico's chairman. Says Rishabh is now ready for the role. A decision in keeping with his mantra that the organization's interest must precede the promoters. That's an exclusive. Well, straight to the day's market action. The markets ended with the minor cuts today, with banks and IT stocks dragging the Nifty lower. The Sensex down 375 points and the Nifty closed around the 25,111 mark, a 100-point cut there. 340 points gone on the Nifty Bank, and the Nifty Mid-Cap Index was flat, closing about 100 points lower. Today, we actually saw a recovery coming in towards the latter half of the day, largely led by Tata Steel and JSW. Now, President Trump has once again hinted at reaching a trade agreement with India. Speaking to reporters, Trump said, and I quote, "The deal will open up India." Now, this comment comes even as Indian Commerce Ministry officials are in Washington as negotiations continue. The statement also comes a day after Trump announced a trade deal with Indonesia and added that a deal with India is progressing along the same line.
We had one yesterday, that was announced. We have another one coming up, maybe with India. I don't know. We're in negotiation. When I send out a letter, that's a deal. In other words, that's a deal. They don't want to ever say that. Oh, how many deals have you made? The best deal we can make is to send out a letter. We're very close to a deal with India where they open it up. Indonesia yesterday was, it wasn't an open country. Now it is.
That's Trump there. Now, the chorus among U.S. bankers batting for maintaining the independence of the Fed is growing louder. Amidst U.S. President Trump's feud with Jerome Powell, a day after J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon said that the central bank's independence was absolutely critical, at least 3 top bankers have closed ranks. Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon has said the Fed's independence is something one should fight to preserve. Citigroup's Jane Fraser, in a statement, said that the Fed's independence is what drives its credibility. Meanwhile, Bank of America's head Brian Moynihan said the size of the U.S. economy and its debt make the Fed's stability important to the whole world. He warned that the markets will react if President Trump replaces Jerome Powell prematurely. However, President Trump has said he's not planning to fire the Fed chair, but he would love it if Powell wants to resign on his own. He also added that the administration can make a change when Powell's term ends in 8 months. Take a look.
No, we're not planning on doing anything. We're very concerned. He's doing a little renovation for $2.5 billion of the Fed, building a renovation, and they have a close to $900 million cost overrun, and it's a shame. But the biggest cost overrun is the cost overrun for interest rates, because we should be paying 3 points lower, and we would save $1 trillion a year in interest if that were the case. And all it is the stroke of a pen. And that goes for his board, too, because his board is not doing the job, because they should try and rein this guy in. So he's doing a lousy job, but no, I'm not talking about that. Fortunately, we get to make a change in the next, 8 months or so. And we'll pick somebody that's good, and we'll pick somebody. I just want a fair job.
I think central bank independence, not just here in the United States, but around the world, has served us incredibly well. I think it's important. I think my comments here on Fed independence are with respect to monetary policy. I think regulation and supervision are different. But with respect to monetary policy, I think central bank independence, Fed independence is very important, and it's something we should fight to preserve.
A stable central bank is really very important, and very important in the United States, because of this size economy with $30 trillion plus of debt out there held all over the world, with the dependence upon trade flows. The stability of this country is actually necessary and important to the whole world. And I think a stable Fed and independent Fed is key to that. And I think the cooler heads, and in a year we'll have a new Fed chair, because that's the right of the president. But I think if the market would really look at a change prematurely as being something very different. That being said, it's a political process and it'll play out. But I think the key is to remember that the core thing is that an independent Fed is critical to the operating of a great global economy like the United States.
Well, U.S. bankers, they're coming out in support of Fed's independence. Now, the U.S. House of Representatives has advanced a trio of crypto bills to the floor for debate. The Genius Act, which would establish a federal framework for stablecoins, has already been passed by the Senate and requires only the House's approval. The two others, including a bill that would bar the Federal Reserve from establishing a central bank digital currency, will move through the House first. In fact, back to earnings season, Wipro has met muted estimates. In the first quarter, revenue contracted 2% on a constant currency basis, while margins have improved sequentially ahead of estimates. Rima standing by with more on Wipro's numbers. Rima.
Thanks so much for that. So as you rightly pointed out, Q1 was in line with muted expectations. But I'm going to see I see some silver linings. For starters, Q2 guidance suggests to an improvement versus Q1, and the deal bookings are very, very strong, up on an average 50% on a sequential basis. But let's get to the numbers first. Now, constant currency revenue growth has declined by 2% quarter on quarter. This is within the company's own guidance. They had guided for -1.5% to -3.5%. So within the guidance, margins have come in at 17.3%. But the Q2 guidance, next quarter's guidance, is at -1% to +1%, which means that if the company achieves the middle point of its guidance, that 0%, it would be an improvement. Even if things deteriorate and the company does, at the lower end of its guidance, -1%, that's still an improvement compared to -2% that they've done in Q1. That said, Q2 is typically a seasonally stronger quarter for Wipro, so generally things do improve for the company. So just to quickly, some more numbers, this -2% would mark the second consecutive quarter for revenue decline, and we've seen revenue declines across all the large cap peers. So whether it's TCS with a -3.3% decline or an HCL Tech with a -0.8%. So basically, large cap IT companies have reported a revenue drop this time, and it's no different for Wipro. The deal wins have been particularly very, very strong. So the total deal bookings have come in at $4.9 billion, which is an uptick of 24% quarter on quarter, 50% on a year-on-year basis. The company's also signed 16 large deals, which includes 2 mega deals. And if you just look at the pure large deal wins, that is up 50%. So Q1 weak, but Q2 points to an improvement versus Q1. Sequentially, it should be better in Q2, and the deal bookings are very strong. Other numbers like attrition is ticking up very marginally, headcount is down by a bit, but I think the deal bookings and the quarterly guidance would be the key parameters, the KPIs to track for Wipro.
All right, Rima, many thanks for joining us. That's Q1 with Wipro. And staying with earnings, Axis Bank has reported a weak set of numbers for the first quarter. It has missed street estimates on all fronts. Profits took a hit on the back of higher provisions. Gaurav Javalkar joins us now to decode Axis Bank's numbers. Gaurav, what seems to be the problem?
Well, Axis Bank actually reported good set of numbers in terms of the top line because net interest income is fairly in line with what the street was expecting. The disappointment is basically coming up from the net interest margins front. They have actually contracted almost by 17 basis points versus the expectations of 10 to 12 basis point decline. Other than that, pre-provisional operating profit, there also we saw strong growth, and this was because of the strong fee income and non-interest income. That is the reason why we are seeing a sharp uptick, which was actually higher than what the street was expecting. But another disappointment came in terms of the asset quality. Now, when we look at credit cost, that has gone up sharply, and that is actually impacting the profitability. Profitability has declined almost by 4% on a year-on-year basis. Axis Bank has also said that there was a technical impact in this quarter of around 620 crore rupees, which has impacted the gross NPAs and net NPAs adversely. In fact, they have also said that the PAT impact is somewhere around 600 crore rupees because of this technical write-off. But apart from that, even if we exclude that, the gross NPAs have inched up almost to 1.4% versus what it was at 1.28%. That is also something that we need to be watchful about. So definitely on the back of the asset quality, we are seeing some disappointment, and as a result, profitability has declined, and as a result, we are also watching out on how the commentary is going to be from Axis Bank, given the weak set of numbers was what the bank has reported for first quarter.
Gaurav, many thanks for joining us. Well, what is not weak is India's iPhone exports. They have risen 53% on an annual basis in the first half of 2025. As per data from Canalys, nearly 24 million units were shipped out of India, up from 15.6 million units in the first half of 2024. The US has emerged as the main export destination, accounting for 78% of the iPhones that have been shipped from India. Now, SBI has launched a qualified institutional placement to raise up to 25,000 crore rupees. The bank will offer shares at a discount of 3% of the stock's closing price yesterday. The issue will lead to a nearly 3.5% equity dilution, but strengthen the bank's capital base. This is the first time since 2017 that SBI has tapped the equity market to raise capital. Now, a union representing employees in the IT sector has urged the Labour Ministry to direct TCS to suspend its 35-day bench policy. The union has called for the setting up of a committee to ensure all IT firms operate within the framework of labour welfare. The bench policy at TCS caps the maximum time an employee can stay without a project to 35 days per year. Employees who exceed this time limit face the risk of demotion or termination. On to a CNBC TV 18 exclusive. A committee appointed by the insurance regulator has advised against merging insurance companies with non-insurers. Sources tell us that the panel, led by former SBI Chief Dinesh Khara, flagged risks to policyholders if such mergers are allowed. Yash is here with more details. Yash, tell us what your sources are saying on the matter.
A few months ago, the government had come out with certain proposals with respect to Insurance Act amendment. One of the proposal was to get views on the fact that whether insurance companies and non-insurance companies can be allowed to have a merger or an amalgamation or not. This is what the government has sought views on, after which the insurance regulator IRDAI had formed a committee, and the committee was tasked with the responsibility of providing its views as far as these amendments and proposals are concerned. It had representation from various members and was chaired by Dinesh Khara, the former chairman of the State Bank of India. Now, what we've been given to understand from our sources is that the committee has submitted a confidential report with the insurance regulator IRDAI, and as per that report on this point of whether the merger or amalgamation should be allowed or not, the committee is of the view that the merger between an insurance and a non-insurance company should not be allowed, and that's because the kind of risks which the non-insurance entity would carry on its books, and that could come on the policy holders of the insurance company. This is the view which has been submitted, and it's particularly negative for Max Financial Services because Max Financial Services have been working on a reverse merger of Max Life into itself and have Max Life directly listed on the exchanges. And now, if this indeed becomes a part of the regulation, that is the committee recommendation, then the approval for Max Financial Services will become difficult, and uncertain. Since the proposal came from the government, the holding company discount between Max Financial and Max Life narrowed to almost negligible from about 20%. But now with that uncertainty, there's always a possibility that holding company discount could re-emerge.
Yash, many thanks. A quick check of some of the other headlines that we're tracking. First, to a CNBC TV 18 exclusive, auto component maker Sona BLW is set to be in advanced talks to supply Chinese electric vehicle maker BYD. Sources say the company may set up a manufacturing plant in China. Sona BLW is a supplier to Tesla already. Hexaware Technologies is inked two separate share purchase agreements to acquire two SMC Square entities. The total transaction will be approximately valued at over 1,000 crore rupees, and it will be an all-cash deal. Shares of Ixigo hit the 20% upper circuit after reporting first quarter results. Ixigo's revenues up 73% to 314 crore rupees. EBITDA grew by over 53% to 25.4 crore rupees on an annual basis. Time for us to enter a break, but up next, the Wall Street Journal report cites black box recordings and claims the captain of the Air India plane that crashed turned off the fuel flow to engines. That and more when we report. The big global headlines of the day. Syrian forces have begun withdrawing from the southern region of the country as part of a ceasefire agreed with the Druze minority community, whom Israel considers a potential ally. Syrian president accused Israel of trying to ignite tension and chaos in his country after Israel's military hit the heart of its capital, Damascus. Israeli forces continue to bombard Gaza. The military has killed at least 33 Palestinians, including 30 people waiting for food aid. These have been killed in Gaza over the last 24 hours. Reports add that the death toll continues to rise amidst ongoing Israeli attacks. More than 58,500 people have been killed across Gaza since the war began 21 months ago. Ukraine says Russia launched 400 drones and a ballistic missile at its cities targeting energy infrastructure. On the other hand, Russia claimed a Ukrainian drone attack injured one person in the country's western region. Russia's Ministry of Defense said its air defense units destroyed 48 Ukrainian drones in a 3.5-hour period. At least 4 people were killed and several injured after security forces in Bangladesh clashed with supporters of ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. The violence broke out during a march organized by a students-led political party in Hasina's hometown. Now, Wall Street Journal report cites black box recordings and claims that the captain of the doomed Air India plane turned off the fuel flow to engines. The junior pilot reportedly panicked and asked the captain why he turned off the switches. Now, remember, the preliminary investigative report that was issued has not released the black box recordings. Neither has it identified which pilot said what in the cockpit. It has only put out one statement, not even a transcript, only a paraphrased statement of what transpired between two pilots without naming them or without saying who said what. Madiha is standing by now to explain the details. Madiha, take us through what the Wall Street Journal is claiming and the reactions that have come in since. And of course, the big question that we've been asking since the report was made public, why have the transcripts not been released?
That's the main question everyone in India is asking, Shireen. So this is the second time the Wall Street Journal has reported on the findings from the AIB investigation into the AI-171 crash based on what it picked from its sources. The first report had flagged the fuel control switches as the focus of the probe, and days later the AIB preliminary report confirmed the role of the fuel switches in cutting fuel supply and loss of thrust. But AIB did not say how the switches moved. It only revealed a single line from the cockpit recording. One pilot asked, "Why did you cut off?" and the other replied he didn't. This line itself was also rephrased and not the actual transcript. Which pilot said what was not clear. Did the pilots move them or did the switches move on their own? That was also not clear. Now, the latest WSJ report goes a step further. It claims Captain Sabrawal moved the fuel switches to cut off, shutting down both engines just seconds after taking off from Ahmedabad. The WSJ has cited sources who have heard the black box recording, saying the first officer panicked and asked the question while the captain stayed calm. Now, we know that the US National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, was assisting the AIB because the Boeing 787 is made in America. And soon after the NTSB team left India, US media reports started surfacing. The AIB has not released the full cockpit transcript, and that has left pilot unions asking, could this have been a system failure that caused the switches to move? Pilot bodies like ALPA India, Indian Pilots Guild, and the Federation of Indian Pilots are demanding transparency. FIP says it is humanly impossible to move both switches in 1 second. It says that malfunction of the full authority digital control, which is FADEC, FADEC, or incorrect power response should be ruled out before assuming a deliberate move by the pilot. Now, FADEC is what governs the thrust control, and pilots cannot override it except by shutting down the engine. If FADEC fails or misbehaves, the engine may not respond to throttle commands properly. Now, FIP is cautioning not to rush to blame the crew, especially when the wreckage shows that the switches were back in run position, possibly from an engine restart attempt by the pilots. So for now, the investigation continues, but this WSJ report has raised serious questions about who moved the switches.
Yes, that question continues to haunt us. Madiha, many thanks for joining us. The Karnataka government, meanwhile, has blamed Royal Challengers Bengaluru for the stampede that occurred during its IPL victory parade. The stampede claimed 11 lives and injured several people who were present at the event. In a report submitted to the High Court, the state government said a public video appeal by Virat Kohli drew an overwhelming crowd despite police denying permission for the event. Indore has retained the top position as India's cleanest city for the 8th time in a row. As per the government's annual cleanliness survey, Surat and Navi Mumbai stood second and third. President Murmu conferred awards at a ceremony in the capital. In the category of 3 to 10 lakh people, Noida emerged as the cleanest city. Well, the Indian Army successfully tested the Akash Prime air defense system at 15,000 feet in Ladakh. The indigenously developed defense system is a surface-to-air missile platform designed to protect military installations from a range of aerial threats. The system scored 2 direct hits on fast-moving aerial targets. Here's another exclusive this evening. Marico's founder and chairman, Harsh Mariwala, said he is grooming his son Rishabh to succeed him as chairman. He also told me that Rishabh is now ready for the role, a decision in keeping with Harsh Mariwala's mantra that the organization's interests must precede the promoters. Listen in.
I think if you look at Indian businesses, there is an expectation that your children will step into your shoes in terms of the role. My son also thought that he will step in. My wife also thought that he will step into my shoes. But I deviated from the normal practice of putting my son in my role. And I did it because of one, I used a thumb rule, and that's the thumb rule I always use. There are always conflicts between an organization's interest and any stakeholder's interests, whether it is the promoters or the employees. And the key thing which thumb rule, the organization interest comes first.
Yeah.
And that's the thumb rule I use when Shogata, who is the current managing director, came to me and asked me whether is there an opportunity for him to play or to become the MD, because that's his ambition. And I discussed that with my board at that time, and the board felt that, yes, I had steered the company for many, many years. I founded the company, and now it was time for me to step down and give him the reins. But I went through a lot of struggle in terms of the decision itself. What will I do? What will I tell my family? And of course, my wife and my son were unhappy that I did this. And socially also, when you go out, how come you didn't appoint your son? At that time, he was not fully ready. And I decided to take this step. But as I said, it's worked out well. It's worked out well for the organization. Our overall valuations have gone up, and our equations have improved dramatically over a period of time. At one point, we were like, not adversaries, but we had our own set of frustrations in dealing with each other. But now we are completely aligned, and now I am grooming him to take over Marico chairmanship from me over a period of time.
You know, in hindsight, the decision worked out.
Yes.
But at that point in time, when Saugata had that conversation with you and said, look, my ambition is to become the managing director, you could have very well said, and I know that you were not ready to give up at that point in time.
Yeah.
What made you say that this is the right thing to do for the organization, knowing fully well that you wouldn't have the buy-in of the family, you wouldn't have the buy-in of your son and your wife and others?
So I think two things. One is we had to retain him. If he had not given him that role, he would have left. And he had made it very clear that he is ambitious, and which is fair. I think every person has their own ambition, and if that ambition is not fulfilled by the current organization, then that person should leave. So he would have definitely left. And I think he was a very prized asset in terms of his capabilities, So we had to retain him. Number two, the company also needed a new set of thinking.
Well, that's a candid conversation there with Harsh Mariwala on a very significant but also a very tough decision that he decided to take many years ago. And of course, how that's played out for Marico as well as for the family. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC TV 18. Stay tuned. We're back in a minute. We're small.